Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the Gerber MP600 and some mods I've done. I even added a bit driver. Now, Gerber has had the MP600 since I think the 90s, 99 maybe. It's been out for a long while. And at the beginning and through some of the years, they did several things. For instance, we've got like the sight tool with this long Phillips driver that fits in there. That's different. They added this saw with replaceable, let's see, where is it at? There it is, with replaceable blades, and that's pretty neat. So they even had a version with a blunt nose tip. They had one with for horseback riders where it had a hoof pick in it. So there's many variations. But unfortunately, it seems like Gerber has sort of stopped updating the MP600. And today, the MP600 just feels a little bit older and like it needs some more updating to me. So that's what I've done with this tool. I've tried to make a couple updates and make this a little bit more viable in today's multi-tool world. Now what this is the MP600 fake, the forgery, and I do not condone that they added the Gerber and the USA, which it definitely is not. So unfortunately, they did that. This is a counterfeit. It's a copy. I reviewed this at the beginning of the week and you can check out that video. But what I've done is I've used this $13 tool and I've hacked it and chopped it and sort of beat it and abused it so that I don't have to ruin my good Gerbers. And then I've come up with something that I think might even be advantageous to you for your Gerber MP600. Now, one of the first things I love about multi-tools is I really like a pocket clip. Now, this one right here is sort of just standing in for illustration purposes. I'll probably leave it on here. This is a cheaper tool, but it's not perfect. It does wobble a little bit, but I got this from a Nextool pin multi-tool that I reviewed months ago, and I took it off there, and this screw fit through the hole in the end, and then it sort of fits my theme. So I definitely think if a Leatherman Surge can have a pocket, can have a clip, then definitely an MP600, which is much lighter, needs a pocket clip as well. Now on the inside, you'll notice that this tool actually accepts Gerber tools. They're pretty much interchangeable. And so you can take these tools out, put a real Gerber tool in, and so I added the exchangeable saw blade. I added the Phillips driver and replaced the one that was here because obviously the real Gerber is better. And I was able to swap some tools from this side. I added a file on this side. Unfortunately, this multi-tool came with a big gap, a huge spacer, and so by adding some tools, I was able to take the file and swap it over here and then fill in this complement of tools. Now, when you're modding the Gerber, you can pretty much use, I believe, I've used the 800 parts from a junk Gerber 800 in here. I've used parts from a Byberry multi-tool that had this locking system in my MP400. So I believe you can use all these tools sort of interchangeably. Now they're going to have different thicknesses and you're going to have to deal with that, and they may not, with the sliding plier head design, you have to be careful that they work. But as far as the lock, I believe they all are sort of interchangeable. So one of the big things I realized was when you use or are modding these tools, one of the things you want to look for is these spacers. And I just had one here, but anyway, some of these spacers have a little leg on them. So I'll show you here. They're round and then they have this part that dips down and it fits in that notch. So essentially, the wider, there we go, it's focusing, the wider they are, the better they lock. The more narrow they are, the worse they work. So that's what's going on with that. Let me pull out another tray of tools, and I think, yes, I have an illustration right here of what I'm talking about. The more narrow that leg is, it works worse. Now this is the Byberry tool I had, and see it has this locking design, and so I was able to use that, very similar to this. I was able to use that in my Gerber 400. So all these tools I think are pretty much interchangeable because they have that design. So I was able to add the Phillips, I was able to add the saw, I was able to move some of the tools around, and then the most exciting tool that I added was I modified the C4 spike to become a 4mm bit driver. And let's go ahead before we dive into it, and I'll just show you how this works. Let's go ahead and put these pliers back down. So there we go. So I was pretty amazed how solid it is and how good it works out of a cheap $13 tool. So really happy with how this turned out. Now, originally this was a solid piece of metal, and the C4, this is the end of the C4 spike. So this, I have to say, it's probably cheap Chinese metal, but it will ruin the wheel on your grinder. So I was using a bench grinder and it just ate up my wheel, and I don't know, might have taken off a 1/4 inch of the wheel, I'm not sure, but just dust spitting everywhere. So this metal is really hard to grind, but I was able to do it eventually. Now what I did with this is I added some electrical tape just to make it look better. I was going to use some heat shrink, but I didn't have some small enough on hand, but I want to peel this back and show you exactly what I did. So what I did with this is I cut the original C4 spike about in half, ground it down, and I left about probably to there. And then I went around and ground it, and I tried to put sides on it so it fits into this adapter. And then I pounded this adapter down onto that thinner portion. So you can see in here, there's going to be a little portion that sticks up, and this is held solidly in place, resting on that. I hope that makes sense. So what I did was, let's see, I've got to find my screwdriver, and here it is. So I took this screwdriver, and this is the other part of it. So originally it was a long piece with two sides, both ends were a 1/4 inch, and this I'd use for HVAC, and unfortunately I lost the bits within about a week because they didn't hold very well. So the bits only go down about maybe 1.5 inches. So I was able to grind this other end, which had this part on it, and then I was able to get a tube with both sides open. And then with the C4 spike, I essentially put that end over here, and I added sides to it so that this end would hold in place and not spin. And then I was able to pound that down, and then you can put the bits on here, and it works really well. So I was really pleasantly surprised with that. A lot of my projects don't always turn out as planned. The beautiful thing about this is that this fits right in between the Gerber handles, and so it doesn't create any issue with the pliers. So I really think this is a good idea. Not necessarily that Gerber has to do it my way or this way, but I really think Gerber does need to update the MP600 and add a bit driver of some sort that has a little bit longer reach than, let's say, like a standard Leatherman. I really like the dual force and the center drive, but I'd love to see an MP600 with a long bit driver as well. Now, unfortunately, being on the outside, it is a little bit awkward. It doesn't have that center drive, but it still works much better than, let's say, just a small stubby screwdriver, at least for some things. Well, I hope you've enjoyed these mods. Let me know what you've done to your Gerber 800. Maybe this has given you some inspiration, and I'd love to hear what you're doing to mod your tools and make them better to fit your needs.